You know, from the time we're kids, we're taught that the world operates like, well, a giant, perfectly balanced scale.
Oh, absolutely.
You put in a certain amount of effort on one side and you expect this equal proportionate amount of reward on the other. It's like the ultimate 50-50 proposition.
Right, because we crave that linear fairness. It feels safe.
We really do. But then you look at actual real world results in your career or, I don't know, natural ecosystems or even your bank account. And suddenly you realize that scale isn't just slightly off. It is like completely broken.
It's the absolute definition of a mathematical illusion.
Yeah.
I mean, we expect democratic balance in the universe, but the universe is actually radically, relentlessly lopsided.
Relentlessly. I like that word for it.
And for those who don't understand the underlying mechanics of that imbalance, well, it feels deeply unfair. But for those who do, it becomes the ultimate leverage.
Exactly. So welcome to your custom-tailored deep dive. We are taking your source material, specifically Richard Koch's foundational concepts from the 80-20 principle, and extracting the absolute most vital nuggets of insight for you.
And, look, anyone listening to this deep dive already knows the Pareto baseline.
Right. You already know about the 19th century wealth distribution. You know the basic shorthand, 80% of the outputs result from 20% of the inputs.
Which, just as a quick reminder, those numbers don't actually have to add up to 100. They are two entirely separate sets of data.
Good point. But yeah, we aren't here to give you a 101 level refresher on what the numbers mean. Our mission today is to completely dismantle the 50-50 fallacy.
I'm showing you the active compounding feedback loops that drive this imbalance.
And how you can actually manipulate them. Okay, let's unpack this. Because what people get fundamentally wrong is assuming the 80-20 rule is just a static observation.
Yeah, they treat it like a snapshot.
Exactly. But it's not. It is a live mechanism operating underneath almost everything you do.
Precisely. We have to move past treating this like, a modern productivity hack or some trendy self-help fad. The 80-20 principle is a universally recurring mathematical pattern.
It's everywhere.
What's fascinating here is how this pattern reveals itself when you look at the fundamental biology and psychology of human behavior. Let's look at George Zipf's work back in 1949.
The Harvard professor, right?
That's the one. He proposed the principle of least effort. So Zipf analyzed all the marriage licenses granted in a 20-block area of Philadelphia in 1931.
Which is such a specific thing to study.
It really is. But he found that 70% of marriages occurred between people who lived within just 30% of the distance of that designated area.
And the mechanism there is what makes it so compelling. Zipf called it the principle of least effort because human beings, like mathematically and biologically speaking, we are wired to conserve energy.
We really are lazy at our core.
We are. We are constantly, subconsciously calculating the path of least resistance. I mean, we aren't going to walk 10 miles across the city to court a potential mate if there's a perfectly compatible partner living just 3 blocks away.
Right. Why would you?
Exactly. Our energy output is heavily skewed toward our immediate localized environment. And that biological desire to conserve energy naturally creates a massive localized imbalance in the data.
Exactly. The human animal optimizes for efficiency, even in romance.
Yeah.
And once you see that optimization happening in human behavior, you start to see the exact same unequal distribution applied to industry and technology. Like, consider the massive paradigm shift that happened post-World War II.
Oh, with Joseph Duran.
Yes, the American engineer.
Yeah.
He took this principle of unequal distribution and applied it to quality control. He coined the rule of the vital few.
The vital few.
Right. He didn't just notice that a few defects caused most of the problems. He realized the underlying mechanism was that complex systems have bottleneck points. A single microscopic flaw in a vital component cascades through the entire assembly line.
Causing like 80% of the total systemic failure.
Exactly.
And because American industry was booming post-war and didn't feel the need to optimize, they completely ignored him.
They brushed him off entirely.
So he took his theories to Japan, and the Japanese essentially used the rule of the vital few to spark their entire post-WWII manufacturing and quality revolution.
Yeah, they completely dominated the global automotive and electronics markets for decades.
It was the moment industry realized they were wasting 80% of their time fixing the wrong problems.
And that realization bled directly into the early tech world, too. By 1963, IBM engineers were studying processing power.
Okay, yeah.
They discovered that roughly 80% of a computer's processing time was spent executing just 20% of the operating code.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It was a total revelation. Instead of trying to optimize the entire software package equally, they completely rewrote their software architecture.
They built the system to cache and prioritize that specific, highly repetitive 20% of the code, making it ultra accessible.
Right. They just ignored the trivial 80% of the code that was rarely called upon. By exploiting that imbalance, they created machines that were exponentially faster and more efficient.
Leaving their competitors totally in the dust.
Completely.
And you see it in the most mundane physical realities too. Like the internal combustion engine in a car wastes roughly 80% of its energy in heat and combustion exhaust.
Oh, wow. 80%.
Yeah, 80% is just wasted. Only the remaining 20% actually makes it to the drivetrain and the wheels, but that 20% generates 100% of the vehicle's forward motion.
That's a perfect example.
But I have to say, even knowing the math, it feels deeply counterintuitive to the way we prefer to design our lives. Like, we still operate under the 50-50 fallacy.
We do.
We assume that if we plant 100 seeds in a garden, we should expect roughly 100 plants to grow. The idea that just 20 of those seeds are doing all the heavy botanical lifting, it defies our sense of linear fairness.
Right.
It's like looking at a complex mechanical watch and assuming every single gear is equally important just because they're all spinning.
Oh, I love that analogy.
But in reality, a few mainsprings are driving the entire kinetic energy of the machine, and the rest are just transferring that energy.
That mechanical watch analogy gets right to the heart of the misunderstanding. We assume every gear is doing equal work because we visually see them all in motion. But motion does not equal leverage.
Exactly. Motion does not equal leverage.
Nature, business, economics, they don't care about our human desire for equal distribution or democratic fairness. They operate entirely on leverage. The components with the highest leverage dictate the outcome of the entire system.
But if this radical imbalance dictates everything from microchips to 1930s Philadelphia marriages to the combustion engine in your car, I mean, it can't just be an isolated coincidence.
No, definitely not.
There has to be a fundamental law of physics driving it. And that seamlessly brings us to chaos theory. Because knowing that these feedback loops exist doesn't really help you leverage them unless you understand how they are formed in the first place.
Precisely. To understand the mechanics of the 80-20 principle, we have to embrace that the universe is nonlinear.
Right.
A linear world is one where cause and effect are proportionate. If A causes B, then A plus C causes D. It's clean, it's predictable, and it's measurable.
But our universe actually operates on complex, compounding feedback loops. Chaos theory explains how microscopic advantages compound over time to create massive, nonlinear disparities.
Yes, the goldfish pond example from the source material illustrates the underlying mechanism of this so perfectly.
Oh, I love this part.
Right. Imagine a pond full of newly hatched goldfish. At day one, they all start out almost exactly the same size. In a perfectly linear 50-50 world, they would all swim around, eat roughly the same amount of food, and grow at the exact same rate.
But in reality, one specific goldfish happens to be born with a mouth that is just a microscopic fraction of a millimeter larger than the others.
Exactly. It's a tiny, almost unnoticeable initial advantage.
But that fraction of a millimeter allows it to gobble up a slightly disproportionate amount of food on day one.
And that is where the feedback loop ignites. More food intake translates to more cellular energy. More energy means the fish grows slightly faster than its peers by day two.
And because it grew faster, its mouth is now even bigger.
Right, allowing it to capture an even larger percentage of the available food on day three. It becomes an exponential curve. Very quickly, you don't have a pond of equally sized fish.
The math has completely run away from you.
Exactly. You have a few massive dominant fish that have cornered the food supply and a vast majority of tiny starving ones.
And we see the exact same compounding mechanism in epidemic theory and the concept of the tipping point.
Yes, unfortunately.
You could have a low-level flu outbreak in a city that remains totally stable for months. It seems completely linear. But if the virus crosses an invisible threshold, say it infects just a few highly social individuals who act as superspreader nodes in the network, that ordinary flu suddenly spikes into a massive public health crisis.
It goes nonlinear.
Exactly. The source notes that small interventions, like bringing the number of localized infections down from 40,000 to 30,000, well, they don't just reduce the public health problem by a neat linear 25%.
Right, because you were removing highly connected nodes in the network.
Yeah. That seemingly small reduction disrupts the exponential compounding effect and can completely collapse the entire epidemic.
In chaos theory, this mechanism is called sensitive dependence on initial conditions. What happens first, even if it seems entirely trivial or random, dictates the entire future of the system. Think about the famous clock over the Florence Cathedral.
Oh, right. Built in 1442 by Paolo Uccello. It's a perfect example of historical path dependence. That clock moves counterclockwise, and its face displays all 24 hours. A coin flip in 1442 essentially locked in human behavior for 6 centuries.
Exactly. Back in the 15th century, there was no universal standard for how a mechanical clock face should look or operate. The Florence clock was just one variation. But if 51% of early influential clockmakers had simply decided to build their clocks like the one in Florence, well, the compounding network effect of that standardization would have taken over.
That microscopic initial advantage would have become the 100% global standard today.
We'd all be reading 24-hour clocks backward right now, and our current 12-hour clockwise standard would seem utterly bizarre to us. In complex systems, initial equality always ends in total dominance.
And we actively participate in this exact same nonlinear dominance today, specifically with our entertainment.
Oh, the movie study.
Yes. The text cites this comprehensive study of 300 movies released over an 18-month period. Out of 300 films, just 4 of them. Literally 1.3% of the total earned 80% of the entire box office revenue. Staggering.
It really is. Now, to understand why, you have to look at the physics of network effects. The audiences behave exactly like random gas particles in a closed environment. Early viewers bounce off each other, sharing opinions.
Right.
If a movie gets a tiny bit of early positive buzz, those conversational nodes connect faster and faster. The early word of mouth creates a positive feedback loop, drawing in more viewers, who then create more word of mouth, resulting in a radical 80-to-1 financial imbalance.
It compounds.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's just like rolling a snowball down a steep, snow-covered hill. The specific snowflake that happens to stick first dictates the entire path, the accumulating momentum, and the ultimate massive size of the boulder when it crashes at the bottom.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
But honestly, looking at the physics of it, doesn't this imply we have almost zero control over our own success? If everything is just dictated by random initial snowflakes and microscopic advantages, where is our agency? Well, it's completely understandable to feel a sense of existential anxiety when you look at the raw mechanics of chaos theory. But nonlinear dynamics don't mean everything is just a hopeless, uncontrollable mess of random chance.
Okay, that's a relief.
What it actually means is that there's a highly efficient, self-organizing logic looking right beneath the surface disorder. The goal isn't to force the universe to be a perfectly balanced 50-50 scale, because you literally can't.
Right.
The goal is to spot the feedback loops as they are forming. You have to identify those lucky streaks where the momentum is already building, where the snowball is already gathering mass on its own, and then forcefully pivot all of your energy and resources into that specific path.
But knowing that these compounding feedback loops exist doesn't help you unless you can accurately measure them, which brings up a very dangerous trap.
Right.
If you measure the wrong variable in the feedback loop, you can easily destroy your own success. We have to draw a hard line between 80-20 analysis and 80-20 thinking.
Let's start with 80-20 analysis, which is the strictly quantitative side. This is where you are looking at hard empirical data. The classic example in the source material is the 100 beer drinkers data set.
Oh, yeah.
If you take 100 of your friends and rank them by how much beer they consume over a year, you are not going to find everyone drinking a uniform amount. You'll likely find that the top 20 friends in that group drink 70% of all the beer.
So that's a 70-20 quantitative relationship.
Exactly. If you are a local brewery running a marketing promotion, it is a massive waste of capital to target the bottom 80 people who only account for 30% of consumption. You use the data to laser focus your ad spend strictly on those top 20 heavy consumers.
But the author issues a massive warning about the danger of applying this quantitative analysis with a linear spreadsheet mindset.
Yes, the bookstore example.
Take the operations of a retail bookstore. A bookstore owner decides to run the numbers and realizes that a mere 20% of their book titles comprise 80% of their total sales volume. A naive, linear thinker would look at that spreadsheet and say, great, the data is clear. Let's stop ordering and stocking the bottom 80% of these books. We'll save a fortune on inventory and warehousing costs.
Which would be catastrophic for the business.
Exactly, because it fundamentally misunderstands consumer psychology and the ecosystem of the store. Customers go to a physical bookstore specifically for the range, the the serendipity and the illusion of unlimited choice.
Right, if you cut the 80% of slower selling books, the ambiance is destroyed and the foot traffic completely dies.
Furthermore, the true 20% driving 80% of the actual profits, not just gross sales volume, are rarely the flashy, discounted bestsellers stacked on the front table.
Yeah, those bestsellers might only make up 5% of long-term sales and have razor-thin margins.
Exactly. The real compounding profit engine of a bookstore is almost always the reliable core inventory backlist that sells consistently at full price year in and year out.
Yes.
So using 80-20 analysis with linear logic is like looking at an oak tree, noticing that the leaves are the only parts catching the sunlight and deciding to chop off the entire root system to save water because the roots aren't photosynthesizing. You have to analyze the right variable or you kill the organism.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that tree analogy perfectly highlights why quantitative analysis must be paired with 80-20 thinking.
Right.
80-20 thinking is the qualitative, highly intuitive side of the principle. There are no spreadsheets required for this. It requires deep, nonlinear reflection to spot the vital few inputs among the trivial many in your own daily life.
You have to step back.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself, what specific 20% of my time is actually yielding 80% of my long-term joy or my tangible success?
I loved the author's story about basically hacking his way through his Oxford degree using this intuitive thinking.
It's brilliant.
He realized early on that Oxford didn't care about daily homework or continuous assessment. The entire degree was weighted on the final exams. By studying the historical archives of past exams, he intuitively figured out that 80% of the test questions were consistently drawn from about 20% of the core syllabus topics.
The professors had their own feedback loops.
Exactly. So he just ignored the vast majority of the coursework, hyper-focused entirely on mastering that recurring 20%, and walked out with a first-class honors degree while everyone else was burning the midnight oil trying to memorize the entire textbook.
And later in life, he applied that exact same intuition to his investments. He put money into a little company called Filofax.
Oh, right!
It made up only 5% of his total investment portfolio, but it ended up yielding 80% of his overall wealth gains. He intuitively spotted the vital few, the snowball that was already rolling down the hill.
And applying this intuitive understanding of how to spot the vital few naturally forces us to critically reevaluate where we expend our professional energy. This leads us directly into how the 80-20 principle completely rewrites the accepted rules of corporate strategy and profit generation.
Yes.
Because the classical economic theory most of us are taught in business school is the concept of perfect competition. You know, the idea that over time, firms compete evenly, markets find an equilibrium, and profit margins stabilize across the board.
But the 80-20 principle completely refused that.
Entirely. It introduces the 80-20 law of competition, which states that a few favorite suppliers will always figure out how to exploit an imbalance, corner the market, and extract disproportionately high returns while everyone else fights over the scraps.
And to find those hidden pockets of disproportionate profit in your own business, you can't just look at standard product lines or generic sales territories. You have to aggressively segment your business by looking for competitive segments.
Competitive segments.
Right. A competitive segment is any specific operational area where you either face a completely different competitor or you hold a vastly different relative market share compared to your primary rival. It's about finding the micro battles you're already winning effortlessly.
The source material gives a brilliant, almost ruthless case study of this with a manufacturing firm called Electronic Instruments, Inc.
Oh, this is a great example.
They did a deep 80-20 analysis on their competitive segments and uncovered a staggering 83-26 rule, meaning 83% of their entire corporate profit was coming from just 26% of their business segments. The rest was essentially dead weight or actively losing money.
So what did they do with that information? They didn't try to universally improve everything to reach a 50-50 balance.
Right.
They doubled down entirely on those priority segments.
Right.
But here is the most brilliant tactical application of the principle. They had a segment of large, highly demanding legacy clients who drove incredibly hard bargains, demanded constant concessions, and required massive amounts of technical support.
Just a nightmare to deal with.
Exactly. These giant clients were effectively bleeding the company's profit margins dry. Instead of just abruptly dropping them, Electronic Instruments actively, tactically maneuvered to lose those specific bad clients to their most hated competitors.
They intentionally passed the infection onto their rivals.
Yes, forcing the competitors to absorb the massive support costs and bleeding their rivals' resources dry while electronic instruments focus purely on high-margin work.
That is just brilliant strategic warfare. There was another great case study for a firm called Strategy Consulting Inc. They discovered multiple overlapping 80-20 rules happening simultaneously within their firm.
Right, the 5-6-21 rule.
Yeah, just 21% of their total turnover came from massive, complex projects, but those large projects generated 56% of their bottom line profits. Then they found an 84-26 rule. Old, reliable, long-term clients made up just 26% of their client roster, but generated a massive 84% of their profits.
It's crazy when you see the numbers.
And when they drilled down into the actual type of consulting work being done, they found that mergers and acquisitions advising was generating 87% of their profits from just 22% of their total revenue. The disparity is everywhere once you look for it.
It really is.
But the temptation here, especially for a freelancer or a small business owner listening to this, is to just impulsively fire 80% of their clients tomorrow. But that feels like fundamentally misapplying the math. Like, if you fire 80% of your clients without a pipeline, you just go bankrupt. So what does this all mean? How do you transition out of the trivial many without killing your cash flow?
This raises an important question because the goal of 80-20 thinking isn't reckless abandonment or burning your business to the ground. It's not about firing everyone immediately. It's about the strategic process of arbitrage.
Arbitrage.
Yes. Arbitrage in this context is simply the slow, calculated shifting of your resources and time from where they produce weak results to where they produce powerful, compounding results. You're actively raising your overall economic surplus by consciously deciding to treat unequal efforts unequally.
Okay, that makes sense.
If a specific client is draining 80% of your mental energy and time for only 20% of your revenue, you don't necessarily fire them on Tuesday. You systematically restructure the relationship.
Right, you raise their rates dramatically to make the operational hassle worth the margin.
Exactly. Or you slowly transition them out as you spend that newly freed up energy finding just one more client that perfectly mirrors the profile of your top 20%. It's a continuous rolling optimization.
It's a complete foundational paradigm shift in how we view effort. I mean, we are culturally conditioned to value hard work purely for the sake of hard work. The 50-50 fallacy tells us that sweat equals success.
But it doesn't.
Right. This deep dive proves that real progress isn't about working harder or grinding longer hours. It's an active daily process of substitution. It's about finding the round hole for the round peg.
Yes.
It means you should celebrate exceptional productivity wherever it naturally occurs, actively look for shortcuts and feedback loops, and ruthlessly, unapologetically abandon the trivial many in order to cultivate the vital few.
You have to deeply internalize the fact that your time is your most finite and most easily squandered asset. Mm-hmm. The 80-20 principle essentially gives you scientific, mathematical permission to be selectively lazy, provided that you are intensely, unrelentingly focused on compounding your own unique 20%.
And that mathematical permission applies to literally every facet of your life. The 50-50 scale is entirely broken, and that is actually the best, most liberating news you could possibly get today. Because it means you absolutely do not have to carry the whole weight of the world on your shoulders to get massive results.
You just have to find the right gear to turn.
Exactly.
And I want to leave you with one final, totally unexplored application of everything we've synthesized today. We've talked extensively about how the 80-20 rule governs wealth distribution, corporate strategy, and the natural world.
Yeah.
But consider your own internal mental space.
Yeah.
What if 80% of your daily anxiety, your exhaustion, and your background stress is being actively generated by just 20% of your daily habits?
Wow.
Or even more confronting, what if it's being generated by just 20% of your personal relationships? If you were to sit down tonight and do a ruthless, honest 80-20 audit on your own emotional load, what is the vital few causing the absolute most friction in your life? And what would happen if you simply decided to cut them out?